Hey everybody, it's the Ambassador coming at you with a brand new video today. And um, I'm going to be covering a very different topic compared to what I normally cover on my channel in my videos. It's something that I've touched upon in a couple other short videos or anything, and it's something y'all probably may have figured out because of the intro video that I have on my main channel page and everything, and maybe something y'all may have obviously figured out. But it's something that has been on my mind to do for a while now, and I figure being that I'm over 100 subscribers, um, and just considering the time of year now is as good a time as any. Today, we're not going to talk about pop culture. Not going to be about any type of geeky, nerdy things or anything. This is going to be a little more personal. This is going to be about me. And this is not necessarily a hard topic for me to discuss. I've done it before and everything, but obviously I have not broadcasted to over 100 people or more. But as some of you may have realized or anything, from some of the other videos I have done, I am a Christian. And I am a member of the Christian church, the Protestant church. And I promise I'm not going to get into a bunch of theological talk with y'all, even though I'm just not going to do it because I would probably lose you all at some point. But some of you may ask, okay, Ambassador, you're a Christian. Why exactly are you? And that thought may never even crossed your mind. But as I've stated before, I would like to have some transparency with you all, my audience, and everything. And I think this is something that is relatively important. It is honestly very central to my life as a person. And I think the fact that I am a Christian. And I know that word may stir some thoughts in in y'all's minds or anything, or it may not. But I wanted to tell you all, well, how as we say in the church and everything in the Christian faith, I wanted to tell you all my testimony, my story about how I came to become a Christian, how I became a follower of Jesus Christ. And this is obviously it's a very personal story and everything, and there's some matters or anything that are involved in it and everything. Now this took place several years ago and everything, long before I ever got on YouTube and everything. I was roughly, well, it was roughly 10 years ago and everything. I was 31 at the time. And um, as I've mentioned before, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother and everything. And after my grandmother passed on, it was primarily just me and my mother because, well, as I've mentioned everything previously, my father passed on when I was 7 years old. But when I was 31, I was in another relationship, different one than I am now and everything. Wasn't married and everything, but I was, um, as I said, I was in a relationship. And my mother had taken very seriously ill and everything shortly after and everything. I had been in a few months after I had gotten into that relationship and everything, which I'll go ahead and be from upfront with you all and everything. My first relationship, we got married and then it ended in divorce. We were married less than a year and everything, but as I mentioned, my mother had taken very seriously ill. She almost died. Thankfully, I've had another 10 years and hopefully another 10 more of her driving me nuts and me driving her nuts. But what came of that situation and everything, because we prepared for the worst because my mother's health was at that time not good. And we didn't know if she would survive the surgery she was going to go through or if she would pass. And in preparing for the worst, we went through her records and everything, or I rather went through her records and was getting the necessary files together and everything to go either prepare for her death or get her set up on Social Security benefits. And I came across, well, actually, my now ex wife and everything came across a set of adoption papers. And I had found out previously that and everything when I was old enough to understand what it meant and everything that my father had actually been adopted. But what I've discovered and everything from these adoption papers was in fact that I was adopted by the people and everything, my mother and father and everything, who I thought were my biological parents, but who were in fact my adopted parents. And this obviously was a very traumatic, for lack of a better word, revelation. At the time, everything, my mother had recovered from her surgery. She was going through physical rehabilitation and everything. And I went to check on her, see how she was doing, but I also wanted to discuss this revelation with her. And I asked her very politely, very everything. I was like, "Am I adopted?" And my mother looked at me and she's like, "Well, why do you ask?" And I pulled the adoption papers out of my pocket and I laid them on my lap. I was like, "Well, I found these." And my mother's eyes started to well up with tears, and she's like, all my life, ever since you've been able to understand me, this was the only lie I ever told you. And I was like, so it's true. She's like, yeah, it's true. We adopted you. Me and your father and everything. We adopted you from your biological parents. You see, my biological parents, they were not bad people. They weren't criminals or druggies or anything like that. They were just, they didn't feel like they were cut out to be parents. And my biological mother and my father and everything worked together and everything. And when my biological parents found out they were pregnant, um, my biological mother asked my father and everything, when we have the baby, do you all want him or her? And my parents and everything had been trying for a number of years to get pregnant, but weren't able to due to some medical reasons. And my father and my mother discussed it, and they said, "Yeah, you deliver the baby. We'll take it. We'll love it. We'll raise it as our own and everything." And back in those days, back in the late '70s, um, adoption was still something that was kind of not taboo, but it was still something that was a kind of, for lack of a better word, it was something that was still frowned upon in a manner of speaking. And I actually did track down my biological parents. Well, my mother anyway. I had found out from her, my biological mother, that my father had actually passed just a few years before I finally was able to track them down and meet my mother, my biological mother anyway. But as y'all can probably imagine, this threw my whole world, my whole life into a complete and total tailspin. And unfortunately, I didn't have the best support system or anything from my first marriage, my first relationship that I was in. My first wife was actually emotionally and, not to put too fine of a point on it, sexually abusive. And I eventually got out of that relationship. I got out of that marriage and everything, thankfully, but at the time, we were still together. And in her own way, she tried to be supportive, but unfortunately, she herself was damaged due to past relationships herself. But what ended up happening over the span of, because I found out about my adoption and everything in December of 2009, and from that point on, my whole life just went down the crapper. I was depressed. I had lost the one, I lost trust in my mother and everything, the woman I called my mother, and I still do to this day. And I had a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, as y'all can probably imagine. But over the span of several months, I was depressed. I was down the dumps. I was absolutely miserable. And then in September of 2010, I tried to commit suicide. And this was something I had never contemplated I would ever do so in my life, because up until this point, I had never had a cause or reason to do so. But I felt very much alone. My relationship with my mother at that time was not the best, and the relationship I was in was not necessarily the best. And I won't go into all the specifics here; it's not really necessary. But thankfully, um, a coworker of my ex-wife and everything came to me, or rather came to her and said, "I know y'all are having some trouble. He's having some trouble in particular, he being me." And they were like, "Have y'all considered going to church?" Now, a little background on me: I was actually raised in church and everything. I was raised in a very small little um, church and everything, not too far from where I currently live. It was actually the hometown my mother and her family grew up in, and they had been a part of that church for several generations. But we unfortunately had to step away from that church, well, particularly that denomination, because of some issues I won't go into here. It's really not important, but just be it to say, I had been out of church. My family had been out of church for quite a number of years. And the idea of going back to church, any church whatsoever, I won't lie, I was hesitant. But we gave it a try. And over the next several weeks, well, maybe it was roughly a month. Hold on one second. There we go. Over the next several months, well, the next several weeks, I had started to try to figure out where I was supposed to go from here, what direction my life was supposed to take. And I came to realize that I cut off a part of myself that I really needed to get in touch with again. That was my faith, my Christian faith. And the pastor at the church and the pastoral team at the church helped me do that. And I met a lot of great people and everything at the church that we attended and everything, me and my ex-wife. And even after the our divorce and everything, I remained in the church. Unfortunately, she didn't. But the more I was going to church, the more I was learning about God again, learning about my relationship with Him again. My heart started to heal. I know that may sound very cheesy, very corny, but that's the best way I know how to put it. And life was getting a little bit better, a little bit easier. I was starting to reconcile with my mother. And finally, one day, I had finally reached, I guess you could say, a crossroads or a fork in the road. And I had made so much progress. I felt better about myself. I felt like I had God back in my life again, which I had not had in several years, almost 10, 15 years, if not more. And but there was still one hurdle I could not quite get over. And that was accepting the fact of who I was and how much my family meant to me. I had done everything I could do to try and reconcile with them, and for the most part, we had, thankfully. And one night, while I was at work, at the time I worked security on graveyard shift and everything, I got in the habit of praying again and, well, praying out loud. And as I've mentioned, I was raised in church. I knew about God. I knew about Jesus. I knew the Bible, at least a little bit. And I was like, God, I've reached this point where I I've still got this burden on my back, and I don't know how to get rid of it. And I talk to God like I talk to a best friend. Again, I know that may sound cheesy, but Some things you just have to go on faith on. I was like, God, all this stuff, that all these events that have happened over the last several months, I realize now it wasn't me or my family necessarily, although it was in part, that got me through it, that kept me alive. It was you. And I was like, God, even to this day, this is still hard to talk about. It's like, God, I need you back in my life. I know I've been away for a long, long time. I was like, I know you have no good reason whatsoever after all of the lousy things I've said and done, how I've treated my mother, at times how I've talked to you. But I was like, I want this burden off my back. I was like, you're the only one big enough or strong enough to take it off my back. I just sat there for a few minutes and I prayed and I had my eyes shut. And I have talked with pastors, I've talked with my professors at seminary and every other person I know, friends and family alike, about what happened next. And the best way they described it was the hand of God reached down and took that burden off my back and healed my heart and healed my life. And again, I know this all may sound completely cheesy as all get out. And y'all may think I'm nuts. But for me, in that moment, the little kernel of faith I had since I was a young man was justified. God made his presence known to me. Jesus made his presence known to me. I opened my eyes and I looked up and I was like, you really are there. You're really real. Even in my heart, I knew you were, but right then, I knew God, Jesus, and every word of the Bible was real and justified. And I profess that Jesus Christ is the Lord of my life, and that God is the Father whom I serve. And I know I'm getting emotional here, but I know I have a few videos before, so this is not anything foreign to you all. And this is not me trying to shove my faith down y'all's throats, far from it. But as I said, I wanted there to be some transparency between us. I know I have mentioned in the past that I am a person of the Christian faith. But I wanted y'all to know how I got to this point. A few months later, me and my now ex and everything, we got married. And unfortunately, the marriage ended after 4 months. It broke my heart. But God and Christ, my family, my friends, my church, they all got me through it. I've gone back to school. I got a bachelor's degree in theology. I'm currently working on a master's of divinity. Because one night, just a few months after the divorce was finalized and I had started to rebuild my life, I asked the Lord, I asked God, you've done so much for me. What can I do? I know I can't repay what you've done for me, but what can I do? Because I want to do something in return. I want to serve other people. I want to dedicate my life to something bigger than myself. And in the back of my mind, I heard a voice that I can only describe as the voice of God or the Holy Spirit say, "You are a leader, so go, learn how to be one, and then I will put you where you belong." So I did so. As I said, I got a bachelor's degree in theology. I'm working on a master's of divinity, all to the end of being a best as equipped leader of God's church as I can be. I am currently trying to find a ministerial position within the United Methodist Church, and come what may, however long it may take me, I know God will put me where I'm meant to be. I know some of you may be sitting there shaking your head saying, "Ambassador, how can I know any of this is real?" And for some of you yourself might be a Christian. It might have been concerned or anything that opening up about your faith would alienate your audience or alienate those around you. Or you may be perfectly open and willing to expressing your faith. And whatever the case may be, I want you to know whether you are a Christian or not, I don't judge. I judge no one because I am just as worthy of being judged by God as anyone. So, regardless of your religious background or lack thereof, regardless of your political and social affiliations, those don't matter to me. I'm a Christian, was raised in the church, but fell away, and I have been a Christian the last 10 years plus. And every day that I've had God in my life has been better than the last. I will not say it's all been sunshine and roses. It hasn't. But it's been a lot easier to have God in my life and get through it than try to get through God without Him. And as far as how things turned out with my ex-wife, well, as I mentioned, I stayed in the church, and sadly, she left. I don't know why. I held no resentment or anger towards her. There's no point. But I will say, in 2014, I met the woman that I'm currently married to. We've been together 6 years, married for 5. And every month, every year, every month, every day, every hour is a blessing. Because I got a second chance at having happiness. Because she is just as devout a Christian as I am. I won't say our marriage is perfect. No marriage is. But she makes me happy. Just like God, she helped me realize I could love again. So, I know this may be, as I said, this is a very different video compared to what I've done for y'all in the past, aside from maybe 1 or 2 other videos. But I want you all to know who the ambassador is. I want you to know what I stand for. And yes, there are 2 sides to me, but those 2 sides are linked. Do I love talking to you all about pop culture? Of course I do. Do I love talking about the stuff behind me and the stuff that's around me? Yeah, I do. But my faith is part of who I am. And I don't want you all to think I was deliberately being deceitful or concealing it from you all. Far from it. I just felt this was the proper time and the proper place to discuss it. So, I know I normally close these videos by asking you to like, share, and subscribe and comment and everything, but somehow that feels disingenuous in this case. So I will simply say thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If you want to contact me, obviously you can get a hold of me on Twitter. You can direct message me on there. You can find me under my handle, Rogue5778. So until next time, this is the Ambassador signing off. And God bless you all.